Up here in the Northern Hemisphere, spring is finally uncoiling and the trails that have been a soggy mess for months and months are finally drying out. So with this condition change, maybe it's time to have a look at what chain lube you're using to optimise for these wonderful dry conditions. Chains have a tough life, especially on a bike, especially on an e-bike where the boosted power means that all that grit and grime, well, it can just chew through chains. But with some sensible choices on what chain lube you're using for what conditions, you can make your chain last longer, and with the right lube in the right conditions, you can even change your maintenance schedule. So you'll be faffing with your bike less and riding more. Let's find out how. Wet condition lubes, or sometimes called wet lubes, we'll go into that in more detail in a little bit, are great when the conditions are gritty and why? Because that extra viscosity, so literally it's stickier lube, it means that it stays onto the chain roller, so that's the inner section of your chain, and it means that it protects it, so it creates a slide barrier, a membrane for the chain to work more efficiently, and it also keeps away all of that grit and rubbish. However, in drier conditions, which hopefully we're moving towards, all of that extra viscosity can mean they're a bit stickier and they can attract more dirt and detritus. So there's other options of chain lube out there. So there's dry condition wet lubes, and there's also some other dry condition lubes, which we'll go into now. So traditional dry lubes have actually been wet. So they go on wet and they stay wet, but they're much lighter viscosity. So hopefully they attract less dirt and less dust. Now, some chain lubes out there, PTs included, do a dry condition wax lube. Wax lube, you say? Yes. So it goes on wet, but it dries out and leaves a dry wax membrane on the chain and key in between the roller and pin interface. So it means it's a lot cleaner. You will have to maintain your chain a little bit less in dry conditions, and they can roll a little bit more efficiently. But they do need a dedicated approach to application. So we'll dive into that now. Bit of science club on wax lubes and why they can be better. So we've already described how they go on wet and dry, but it's more the science in the roller and pin. So if you think about every chain link, you've got the side plates, you might have inner side plates, bit confusing, that does make sense. You've then got a pin that holds it all together, then you've got a roller. That acts a lot like a bearing. And underneath that layer is where we need the chain lube. And that's where wax lubes can be really good, because under the microscope, at almost a molecular level, the way that wax can hold load and wear and slide under load, it can actually do it better than a wet lube, and that's because of the way that the wax is molecularly. Beyond that, we'll have to call in a chemistry expert, but yeah, they're meant to roll even quicker than a normal wet lube and stay clean. Obviously, before you clean your chain, it's a really good idea to wash your bike. No, I'm here. Yeah, washing your e-bike, we've done loads of videos on it. We've got a link here and probably down there too. So yeah, wash your e-bike. Make sure you do everything that's in that video so it's all spick and span, apart from all the chain lube stuff and the chain degreasing, because we're going to cover that just now. Okay, post bike wash. We've got two options of how to degrease your chain and then re-lube it in depth. There's pros and cons to both. So the first option is, well, you just leave your chain on. Now, it sounds really easy, but when you're using degreasers, some of them on the market are really powerful, and all that power means that you can easily contaminate disc brakes, whether it be the rotors or the pads. Okay, option two, that seems a little bit more hassly, but can be easier, is to take your chain off. There is a caveat that most brands recommend that their quick links are only used once, so up to you on how many times you use it. Recommendation from manufacturers is that they are a single-use item. But yeah, we've got options here, chain on or chain off. Okay, if you're fitting a new chain, you'll still need to degrease that too. So as with all the other options, whether you take the chain off or leave it on, make sure you spend a lot of time and elbow grease and quite a bit of degreaser, making sure the chain is super clean. If you've decided to take the chain off, you can leave it overnight in a bath of degreaser. Maybe you give it a shake, maybe you'll flip it over. Do wear gloves, because often degreasers are quite powerful and thus powerful for paws and digits. But just give it some time, let it be really, really clean. If you're doing it on the bike, make sure you mask off those other areas that you don't want any degreaser on, and you do have to spend a lot of time scrubbing to make sure it's really clean. Okay, now we've degreased the chain, now it's time to dry it. Dry it, I hear you say. Why are we going to dry it? Well, many wax-based chain lubes, like PTs, are emulsion-based, so that wax is held in water, and we need to make sure that there's no water in those rollers or in those links, because, well, we don't want any water or any excess lube in there, because we want the wax lube to go in there. So make sure your chain is really dry. You can leave it overnight, you can leave it out in the sun if you have so much sunshine. The other option, of course, is to carefully use a hairdryer, or if you're in a rush and you're especially keen and obviously very health and safety minded, you could use a heat gun. But yeah, time to dry that chain. If you've decided to take the chain off the bike, now is a good time to put it back on. You can re-lube it and then put it back on, but it's a bit faffier. And for me, I find it easier if I put the chain back on the bike. If you've just left the chain on the bike, I recommend shifting down into the smallest cog. So we've got lots of space here, and we're going to work our way back from the chainring back to the rear mech. And we're going to apply carefully just one sort of pea-sized blob of lube on each of those rollers. And we're going to work all the way across. We're not splashing it all over like you may see on some other videos, because we need that lube to soak in slowly, because we want to make sure that all the wax that's in emulsion in this lube can soak in and get between the roller and the pin and between those link plates. So it is a slow process, but it's worth it. Once you work back from the chainring to the rear mech and you've got that pea-sized droplet on each of the rollers, you just got to wait for it to soak in. It doesn't take too long. We're not waiting for it to dry. That's the next stage. We just want it to soak in. So do that process of allowing it to soak in on the whole chain until all the rollers on the whole chain have got a nice pea-sized drop of chain lube. With non-wax-based lubes, what I'd be saying now is to wipe off the excess. So all we've got is the very minimum of chain lubricant that we need. But this is a wax-based lube, and this stuff works in magical ways that's different. And we need the excess to stay on there, because that's the waxy stuff. What we need to do now is, well, just wait. And we'll wait a little while, depending on literally your local conditions and how humid it is, how warm it is. If you've got your bike in the sun, if it's in a kind of dry, dark cupboard, it'll all take a different amount of time to dry. And that's because we're wanting the water to evaporate and just leave the wax on. And that's why this lube can be so good, is it's in emulsion. You might be wondering how to tell when your wax lube is dry. Well, often there'll be a colour change. So this PT's is a sort of nice beige colour. Yeah, we'll go with beigey green. And that'll go clear once it's dried out. Other lubes are going to change different colours, but essentially you want it to be clear, and that's just the wax that's left over. So wait until it is fully dry. With the chain waxed and dried, now it's time, well, it's just time to go and ride your bike, so just go. The advantage that I found from personal experience of these wax-based lubes is that they don't attract as much dust. And when they do get dust and grit, due to the magic of the wax, it sort of beads off and those bits of grit fall off. So you don't have to put as much on as often, so you get more ride time. So get out there, enjoy the trails. Hopefully this video was helpful. If it is, like and subscribe.